and copied. And if you're a football fan now and you watched Oklahoma play the other night, the wishbone that they use is just a pure outgrowth of the Bailey series, and Coach Dodd was one of the primary innovators in that. Competitor. Coach Dodd's a formidable competitor. If you're going to compete with Coach Dodd, you better come prepared. Whether it's in football, on the tennis court, on the pool table, ping pong, gin rummy, checkers, you better be prepared, because he doesn't take any prisoners. He goes for the win. Crafty. One of the other things I really enjoyed, and as I look back over years playing ball at Tech, is Coach Dodd's, what I call his general fieldship on the football field, on the sidelines, play calling and the strategy he used to win football games. I've heard him say many times that the close games are won by good calls, and Coach Dodd was a student of the game, and he practiced it, and he was an excellent field general. Lucky. Now this is kind of an intangible, and all you know in your business, you have breaks go good and bad against you, but Coach Dodd believed in positive thoughts. He coached positive. He believed he was lucky, and when his opposition came to the field, Wilton, in November, that was another element his opposition had to contend with. Coach Dodd was lucky on Grant Field. Fair. The gentleman I alluded to before will concur in this. One reason I went to Georgia Tech, we all knew that he had a reputation. If you got hurt or banged up and you couldn't play ball and you passed your grades, you still had your scholarship. 4 years, and you could get a degree. He didn't run you off because you couldn't contribute to his football team. He was committed. He was fair. That's an example. Respected. Early on in the season, Coach Dodd would win a couple games, and boom, right at the top, #1, #2 rated in the polls. Football coaches around the country rated him very, very high and respected him. Fun. Coach Dodd believed football should be a fun game, and light preparation was his tactic and his philosophy. He wanted his football players to enjoy it. He didn't beat you to death on the practice field. Coach Bryant over at Alabama said Coach Dodd was the only coach he knew in the country could operate on that tactic and still beat you, and he was envious of it. And then the last thing, motivator. Coach Dodd was a great motivator. He had some simple rules, and if you didn't abide by them, you were gone. One is you had to pass your grades, and if you passed your grades, you could stay in school and play football. And you know, there's this thing, pass, no play now. Coach Dodd had no pass, no scholarship. Gentlemen, we haven't missed today a great personality, outstanding man, civic-minded. He's got lots of great stories to tell you, and I want to introduce you to you now, Coach Bobby Dodd.
Thank you, Marvin, for the wonderful introduction. Makes me feel so good to have one of my boys talk about me like that. Thank you, Bulldogs, for standing up honoring me today. I'm here to speak to you because if you were a football coach and you went up to South Bend to play those Irishmen who don't get beat many times at South Bend, and you had a quarterback who helped beat those guys when you come and speak for his club. Marvin here in 1959 helped me beat Notre Dame. And you don't beat Notre Dame very often. And when he asked me to come and speak to y'all, I'm here. And another thing is, men, I've never been to a Rotary Club where you have as good a food as y'all have. Unusual. So I'm delighted to be with you. I want to tell you some true stories. When I was 12 years old, we lived in a little town of Galax, Virginia, over in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And my daddy moved us over to Kingsport, Tennessee, and because they had never played football at Kingsport and decided to have a team, they'd never seen football, I made the team. I'm 12 years old, weigh 100 pounds. Men, that's the biggest thrill of my life. It didn't matter to me, we got beat 59-0. It didn't matter to me, we didn't win a game. I'm on that football team. Well, sir, 6 years later, I'm still on that football team. Now we're beating some people's head in. We beat Norton, Virginia 193 to nothing. We beat Bristol, Tennessee 100 to nothing. We're on a roll, and I'm having a ball because anything I loved, it was high school football and high school basketball. And then a strange thing happened that changed my entire life. The high school principal, bless his soul, he came to me at the end of my 6th year in football, and he said, Robert, you can't play any more football. This hurt me. Men, this hurt me. See, I'd planned to make high school football my career. And he says, as you know, you're failing all your work. I knew that. He says, I will make a deal with you. Can you believe that the high school principal did this for me? He said, if you will study and pass all your credit, all your courses, you'll have 14 credits. He said, as you know, it takes 16 to graduate. He said, I will give you 2 credits you didn't even take, and I'll give you a diploma because I want you to go to college. Well, I had no idea ever going to college. No member of my family ever graduated from high school but John. We thought there's something wrong with John. But I decided that if I'm going to play any more football, I got to go to college. So I told Mr. Kaufman, I said, I will do it because I want to play some more football. So for the first time in my life, men, I studied. I had to get some books. I didn't have any books. and I passed all my courses, and Mr. Kaufman gave me a diploma. Shocked everybody in Kingsport. Nobody thought I was going to graduate from high school. Well, now I'm going to college. I got a buddy. He played 4 years with me. He was the ideal athlete, the greatest athlete you ever saw. Fastest boy in the state, heavyweight boxing wrestling champion, straight A student, just a great boy. And we're going to school together. But I say where we're going because I'm the quarterback. And so I said, Paul, we've been offered a scholarship at Vanderbilt and University of Tennessee. Our families didn't have a dime. We had to have a full scholarship. So I said, Paul, we'll go down to Vanderbilt. We're going to go play for old Dan McGugin. So come September 1, we head down to Nashville. We hitchhiked. We got down there for 2 weeks. We were practicing football with the Commodores, and we're not having to go to school. I love that. And then one day they came out on the practice field, and they shocked me. They said, Robert, you can't go to Vanderbilt. Said, your grades just came in. They said, we have never seen grades like yours. Now, this is the middle of September, and we'd already turned down the University of Tennessee and made General Neyland mad because he wanted my buddy. So here we are in the middle of September with no place to go. So I said, come on, Paul, we'll hitchhike to Atlanta. We hitchhiked to Atlanta. We went out to Georgia Tech. My brother John, the only one to ever graduate from high school, he's going to Tech. And I got out there, and John hurt my feelings real quick. He said, Bob, I hate to hurt your feelings, but you're too damn dumb to go to Georgia Tech. I said, well, I know what we'll do. We'll go over to the University of Georgia. Anybody can get in there. and we could. But Mr. Harold Hirsch would not give us full scholarship. We didn't. They had a lot of football players at Georgia at that time, and also at Tech, 1927. But we couldn't get a full scholarship, so we can't go to Georgia. My brother-in-law lived in Perry, Georgia, right below Macon. He said, I'll get you a scholarship to Mercer. And he did. And we're going to Mercer. But the night before we were going to Mercer, my brother-in-law said, I'm going to call Neyland, University of Tennessee, and see if he still won't take y'all. I said, he won't take us. He said, I'm going to call him. He called Neyland, University of Tennessee, and Neyland was mad. But he wanted my buddy. And he said, if you'll have him up here in the morning by 10 o'clock, said that's the last hour they can register in school. This is way up in September. He said, I'll still take him. My brother-in-law put us on a train out of Atlanta that night. We got in Knoxville next morning at 8 o'clock. We registered at the University of Tennessee at 10 o'clock. We played in the freshman football game that afternoon at 1. Well, sir, after 4 years of football and 4 years of basketball, I hate to tell you this, Marvin, but I'm a first quarter junior at the University of Tennessee right now. I haven't passed anything except physical education courses and history courses. That history teacher loved football. Well, sir, after my experience in high school and my experience in college, for some reason, when I became head coach at Georgia Tech, I became obsessed with the idea I'm going to graduate every boy who comes under me. And believe me, I did. I graduated some dumb ones. I won't name the names for embarrassing them, but I had some dumb ones. Not this one, of course, and not John and Canada, but I had some dumb ones. But I stayed with them. I stayed with them, graduated them. And I want to tell you about one special case of how it's paid off. I had this big old boy come to me from over here at Bass High School here in Atlanta. He's 6'5", 220, all-state football, all-state basketball. I said, I've got me a good one now. But when he came over to Tech, he had a bad knee, and we had to operate on it. When that got well, we put him in scrimmage, we knocked down his shoulder. We had to operate. When that got well, we put him in scrimmage, and we tore up the other knee. When this was operated on and he was well, he'd been there 5 years, and he had that on the varsity uniform yet. And my faculty advisor, old Dr. D.M. Smith, who you Tech men remember, Dr. D.M. came down to me and he said, Coach Dodd, this lad will never graduate. He's dumber than you were. I said, Doc Smith, this boy needs a degree bad from Georgia Tech. His daddy was a drunkard, left him and his mama, and that boy's got to graduate from Georgia Tech. He said, you're wasting your money. I said, I'll waste it. At the end of 6 years and 380 hours of private tutoring, I graduated that boy. You know where he is today? He's my son-in-law. Old Joe married Linda. Gave me 4 of the finest grandchildren you ever saw. And old Joe Thompson was a state senator from up there in Cobb County over there at the Capitol for 12 years. You know what I say? If I'd had old Joe one more year, he'd be governor today. You old-timers will appreciate this story, I think, because back in the 20s, the big thing in every town and the big social event was the town baseball team playing a visiting baseball team. In Galax, my little hometown, the catcher on the baseball team was also the town policeman, old Jim Anderson. Old Jim was my second cousin. I was so proud of old Jim. Old Jim would pull this play every Saturday. I would go down to the police station every Saturday morning, and old Jim would take a big Irish potato and he'd peel it round and white, just the size of a baseball. Come Saturday afternoon, old Jim's back of that plate. And back in those days, you know, the umpire was out behind the pitcher. He wasn't back of the catcher. And old Jim's got this Irish potato in his hip pocket. I could see it bulging out. And I couldn't wait for the visitors to get a runner on third base, because that's when old Jim's going to pull his play. Visitors get a run around on third. Old Jim would reach back, get that Irish potato, and he'd cup it in his right hand. He'd signal for a pitch out. When that baseball hit his mitt, he took that Irish potato and threw it 10 feet over our third baseman's head. Here comes that runner digging for home. And here's old Jim with the baseball. And men, our umpire would call him out, and the damnedest fight would start you ever saw. And old Jim finally got a little arrogant. Old Jim got a little cocky, and he tried to play over at Roanoke. They carried old Jim back in the ambulance. And the play has never been used since. Old Bear Bryant and I were big friends. Bear was a great character, probably the greatest football coach that I ever competed against. And we told stories on each other. He was always giving me left-handed compliments. He'd say, old Dodd can coach good football players better than anybody, but I can coach poor football players better than anybody. And he'd say, old Dodd can play on Saturday, but I can coach them all during the week. And I had my stories I told on him. And I want to tell you one story, one of my favorites. When old Bear, he'd gone up to Kentucky and coached about 12 years, and he left there because they had a big banquet up there, and they gave Adolph Rupp a Cadillac, and they gave him a Mickey Mouse wristwatch. So he thought it was time for him to get out of Kentucky. And he went out to Texas A&M, stayed out there a couple of years, and disrupted the Southwest Conference. And then they called him back to Alabama. And when he went back to Alabama, believe it or not, you football fans, Alabama had a weak football team. They lost 10 games. They didn't have good football players like you think of Alabama. And when old Bear got back, they had used all their scholarships and had weak material. Old Bear wasn't going to play with those weak football players. You know what old Bear did? They didn't tell old Bear that swimmers couldn't play football. Old Bear went out and recruited 20 of the biggest swimmers you ever saw. They damn near drowned when they put them in the pool. But they could play football. And old Bear was such a dominating character. He was just dominating as anybody you ever saw. I sent word to President Carter, Jimmy Carter, our governor, our president, and I said, you know, every time we negotiate with them Russians, all you men know this, we get the worst of the deal. I said, President Carter, next time you're going to negotiate with them Russians, you let old Bear do our negotiating. I said, if you'll put him in a room with them Russians for a week, when they come out, we'll own Moscow. And I said, we'll have all their vodka except what Bear drunk up. Great guy, best defensive coach probably in America, and defense will win. Tech and Georgia football teams. You and I are very fortunate, whether you're a Bulldog or whether you're a Yellow Jacket, in having two fine football coaches in our state. The Dogs have the upper hand on us because they're the state university. But our people are doing a great job. Curry, to me, is the greatest individual in college football, with all due